If you have not already done so, LO5 starts by looking at what's called a flex book. It's an online textbook that I'm probably going to be using the rest of the year. It's free and it's really awesome. So please follow the link. Again, if you have not done this already, take the notes on food chains, food webs, and trophic levels by yourself, and then come back to this video for the second part on nutrient cycles. If you're ready to go on nutrient cycles, let's begin. First, we have the water cycle. This one should be pretty simple. Hopefully you've heard about it enough before. And by the way, as I'm going through this, if you miss any of the information, I did give you the link to the site in the note packet, and it's also on BlendSpace, or just rewind me and play me again. So, water cycle. Why water is needed? All living things need water to grow and survive. The parts of the water cycle, again, you should be very familiar with. Since it's a cycle, I could technically start anywhere, but I'm going to start with precipitation, which would be water in liquid form as rain, or solid like snow or ice, and it just comes down to the earth. For writing things down in your notes, you just need to write down what you need. If you know what precipitation is, then you don't need to write anything. Runoff or infiltration. Precipitation comes down to the earth. Some of it runs off the surface and joins lakes and rivers and streams, etc. Some water infiltrates or goes down into the soil, into the groundwater, and then joins up with larger bodies later. Evaporation. Water gets heated, becomes a gas, and goes up towards the sky. Condensation. The water particles reform into a liquid, usually on solid pieces like dust and whatnot, and we can start the cycle over and over again. The carbon cycle is needed to help recycle carbon for the atmosphere, so think carbon dioxide. Glucose, sugar, C6H12O6 has carbon in it, and glucose we use to make energy, so we need the sugar from plants that get the carbon from the carbon dioxide. Again, interconnectedness. Things of the carbon cycle to know. Combustion. So a lot of carbon is found in oil, coal, and natural gas. In order to get the carbon from that, we have to burn it, and that's combustion, is burning fossil fuels. Many organisms, like us, breathe out or respire carbon dioxide. That's respiration, which releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And then photosynthesis, plants breathe that in order to make glucose. Decomposition then would be one of the final stages, and again, because this is a cycle, it goes around and around. When something dies, the organic parts of its body get broken down. The organic parts have carbon, and that goes into the ground. Now technically, once it's in the ground, it leaves the cycle. However, we can get to it again once we start combusting fossil fuels. The third cycle important to ecology is the nitrogen cycle. We need nitrogen for proteins, we need nitrogen for DNA, but about 72% of the atmosphere is made out of nitrogen that we can't use. It's not in a form that we can get into our bodies, and so it needs to be what's called fixed. So you'll hear nitrogen fixation. When I talked about the research in California that I did, or that I helped with, there were plants that were nitrogen fixing plants. It was their job to take atmospheric nitrogen and turn it into something usable. Things that fix nitrogen would be lightning. Lightning can actually make atmospheric nitrogen usable. Plants with nodules. Nodules are these little bumps on certain plants like soybeans that have bacteria living in them, and legumes, which would be like peas. And the bacteria inside of it fix the nitrogen. Bacteria in the soil are also nitrogen fixers and help make a usable form. And then finally, death and decomposition of organisms. Well, when organisms decompose, one of the things that does that is bacteria. The bacteria release that nitrogen back into the atmosphere, which can then be fixed later on by something else. The last important cycle in ecology is the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus, remember we talked about DNA, PSNB. That P was a phosphate. Phosphate is phosphorus. And there's other things as well, but DNA is a huge important thing that we need phosphorus for. Things that you need to know about it. Most phosphate is stored in rocks and soil, and we can't really get to it until the rocks are broken down or weathered. As rocks weather, that turns into soil, and that also releases phosphorus. Plants then absorb phosphorus through their roots, and then animals eat the plants that absorb the phosphorus, and that gets passed on and on and on. And then when the organism dies, that phosphorus gets added back to the soil and the cycle can start all over again. Once you have all the information you need, your next step is to take the quiz on blend space, and remember, you can always use your notes. Ask me if you have any questions. Good luck!